Welcome. My name is Joe Miller. I'm founder and CEO of the Washington Center for Technology Policy Inclusion. You can find us at WashingTECH.org. Welcome to Mr. Alan Davidson. For those who don't know Alan, Alan is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Assistant Secretary of Communications and Information at the U.S. Department of Commerce. He has 20 years, working in this area and in many different aspects of it. He's done public interest work. He's worked as a lawyer. He's worked in the Obama-Biden administration as their first director of digital. He's been with Mozilla, with the Center for Democracy and Technology. The list goes on, New America Foundation. So there's really no better authority on this topic than Mr. Davidson. So welcome. And one of the things we'd like to begin with is, obviously the main thing we'd like to begin with is the Joint Center's report that came out last year, which folks can find at jointcenter.org, on broadband build out in the Black rural South. And the Joint Center report found a disparity of 38% of folks in Black rural South lacking access to broadband compared to 22% across the rest of the country in other areas. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously, a lot of people in this room kind of know by default why broadband is important, but for those who don't know and for those who are kind of used to having broadband, we'd love to hear more about what your perspective is in terms of the importance of broadband in these communities.
Terrific question. So maybe just to take a half step. First of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for having us. And many thanks to the Joint Center and to Spencer Overton in particular. I'd say even I joined the Commerce Department in January, and I feel like I've learned a lot from the Joint Center and from Spencer. So I really appreciate it. We have been talking about the digital divide in this country for over 20 years. And finally, thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, thanks to the leadership of President Biden, who cares deeply about this, finally we have been given some serious resources, billions of dollars, to do something serious and structural about it. And I sense I probably don't need to tell folks in this room why that's so important these days, right? There was a time when internet access was a luxury. Today, it is a necessity, right? People need to be able to get online, to be able to go to school, to access jobs, to get economic opportunity, to get health care and telehealth, to get access to justice. We need that kind of access. And the president has given us a very simple but ambitious mission, which is to connect everybody in this country, everyone, with high-speed, affordable, reliable internet service. And that's going to be a huge job, but we have been given the resources now, finally, to do something like that. So we're excited about that opportunity, but it's a real all-hands-on-deck moment. We're going to be spending billions of dollars in the coming years. We were given, in my organization, almost $50 billion to do this work. There are other agencies that are doing it. And so we need everybody, and we need to work with everybody to make sure we're reaching all of the places in America that need this work. And I will just say one last thing, and we should dig in on the details. But this is a once-in-a-generation kind of thing, right? Generations before us, they brought water and they brought electricity to rural America. We're still working on some of that, right? We built the interstate highway system in this country. This is our generation's big infrastructure moment. This is our chance to connect everybody in the country with what they need to thrive in the modern digital economy. And so I'm excited to be here to work with all of you, figuring out how we can make that happen for everyone.
Absolutely, and it's surprising that after all these years of the internet that so many people still lack access to broadband. And we're talking about $65 billion that Congress allocated as part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021. And so how is the process? What does the process look like for folks who want a share of that multi-billion-dollar fund?
So the big thing to know about this is a lot of the money is going to states. We've got $42 billion that's with a B, $1 billion that we're going to be allocating through states, and states are going to be doing the grant making. And it's focused on unserved communities, so communities that locations, families that don't have good internet access right now. The states are going to be doing a lot of that grant making work. We also have a digital equity program that's focused on reaching communities that have been left behind, because we know that there are populations that have been particularly disadvantaged, communities of color, the elderly, poor communities, and there's special money for those communities too. But a lot of it runs through the states. And I think one of the important messages is we need your help keeping the states accountable, making sure that they are spending the money in the right way so that we're reaching everybody who needs it.
Right, because obviously there are political implications there.
Yeah, you could say.
For many years, I mean, we look back, as far as the GI Bill, which helped build infrastructure, but what we have is this problem of redlining that's been going on for many, many years that affects education, that affects some of the other infrastructure and health issues that you raised. Just in Fairfax County here alone, segregation is still a huge problem. Some of those structures that are still there. So what is it that NTIA is going to do around NTIA? What is it that you're going to do to help resolve some of those existing disparities, remove some of those existing barriers, and then also, sort of facilitate productive conversations in areas where maybe the politics don't align as much as we'd like them to when it comes to the Black rural South?
So a couple of thoughts there. First of all, you're entirely right about this history, and it's something that we think about a lot, that we've not done this well necessarily at the federal government before. And you were talking before, and so this is an opportunity to try and get it right. You talked about that data before, and I salute the work, the reports that have come from the Joint Center, Dr. Harrison's work, if you haven't read, amazing stuff about, chilling stuff about how much work we still have to do. Our own data actually backs this up. Our internet use survey from last year just showed that Black households identified, a quarter of Black households said that they were not getting internet service at home because of cost. And that's a much higher number than we've seen from other communities. So we know that this is a big problem, and it's a particular problem for Black communities. And so I think one of the important things that we can do is really, as I said, the states are going to be really important here. We are going to be pushing the states to make sure that they are listening to a diversity of voices. And in fact, in our notices that we put out, one of the first things we had to do was put out a big Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO we call it, this year. And we put a set of requirements in there that said states have to show us that they are coordinating with local communities and a broad set of voices. They have to show us a digital equity plan. Before we release any of this money for them, we are going to be insisting that they show us those things. And we've given them examples of how to meet the mail on that. But the most important thing is going to be engaging in that process and making sure that the states, are representing the broad set of needs that are out there.
And then when it comes to enforcement, is this something that would stay in place if the administration at the Department of Commerce were to change?
Well, we're trying to hardwire it in, and I'd say I know different administrators could approach this differently, but we have made it a requirement, and I'd say that we recognize that that local coordination need is something that it's more than check the box. We have put a set of requirements in there to make sure that states do it, and it's partly because we know that that these broadband deserts exist out there. You mentioned Fairfax County. They exist everywhere. They're in the South. They're across the country, and we need to make sure that we're holding states to account and that they're addressing all these needs.
And so this is going to require sort of a granular civic engagement.
Yeah.
So what are folks who are experiencing challenges with accessing broadband as this process moves forward? Is there a complaint process for them, or
Yeah.
how are they going to be? What does NTIA envision specifically around engaging those communities?
So there's a couple of things. One is, as I said, we've got these requirements hardwired in. It says if you're a state going to get money, you have to show us how you've consulted. So part of that is that's how we're going to hold folks to account. The other thing I'd say is one of the most important things we've been trying to do is to figure out how we can build out our team out in the states to make sure that folks have a way to get to us and to be part of this conversation. So it's not just about relying on a state, right, broadband office. And so we have hired in the last couple of months, we've been ramping up quickly. We've got what we call them federal program officers. It's basically a person from the government, from the Department of Commerce, in each state. And every state's going to have a person. And they're mostly out in the states. They're not here in DC. They're in state capitals. They're out in cities. And so every state, has a person who's waking up every day thinking, how do I make Mississippi succeed? How do I make Georgia succeed? How do I make Montana succeed in this program? And also, that's a kind of one-stop shop for people in local communities to say, there's a government representative here who is tasked with listening and organizing and helping bring these voices in. And they're posted on our website. We've actually got it very prominent so folks who want to reach these program officers can. And they are out there, operators are standing by. We want to hear from you all and from people out in the field about the situation out there.
And is there a local media strategy? I mean, a lot of our folks,
That's great.
since they don't have access, they're not hearing about this. Are there partnerships with local radio or local TV stations?
Yeah, well, partnerships are really good. It's one of the things we've been thinking about. And this program is still fairly new. It's going to take years. We're going to be doing this for years. So ideas like this are all welcome. Hopefully somebody's writing down some of these ideas in the back from my staff. We do have a real local media strategy, and we've been, as we're rolling out, even every state gets a planning grant, for example. We're trying to do a digital equity planning grant and a state grant, infrastructure planning grant. And we're trying to use those, for example, as moments to raise awareness around these things. And you're right, we need to be doing it in traditional media as well as online. It's so funny, we always talk about like, if you want more information, go to our website. Well, we need to be reaching folks who don't have the ability to get to the website, right? So we've got to use all the tools.
All the tools and it seems like you've provided many of them. So what about other areas? And we're seeing some disparities in urban areas.
Yeah.
New York City has intervened in some ways to bring broadband to public housing. Is that being used as a model across the U.S.? And if not, what are some models that you're looking at, and what are some of the disparities in urban communities that you're focused on?
I said, the mission is to reach everyone, right? And one of the things I think people do think, and there is a giant problem in rural America, and for sure, and that is probably first and foremost where we will spend a lot of energy. But we know, and our data has shown, that there are, as I said, broadband deserts all across the country, in suburban areas, in urban areas. We've been looking at, for example, this issue around multi-dwelling units, so apartment buildings, where you might, if one person has service, we say, oh, the whole building's covered. Well, there might be, dozens of families who are not actually getting service. So we are really trying to address that, and you're right, New York City's been a great example of how to do that, but we want to make sure that our work here, both on the deployment side and on the digital equity side, is reaching that broad array of communities.
Right, yeah, my mom is one of the folks that would be affected by that, and she actually lived in the South Bronx where Robert Moses raised all of those buildings to build the Cross Bronx Expressway, and she's been in the same building since 1971, so we're talking over half a century.
And then you wonder, like, what's connectivity like there? I don't know what her internet service is like, but we worry a lot about. I was in Cleveland a couple months ago, beginning of the summer. Went to East Cleveland and visited a senior center there. People are helping folks figure out how to get online. It's not, and I was saying to folks, well, at least you've got access here. And they're like, oh no. The local provider, who shall remain nameless, says that you can get high-speed internet on my street, but we can tell you if you try and get that service, it's not available. So one of the most important things that we're doing is trying to map that out. And the one other thing I would say that's really important to focus on is how we're collecting data in this space. To figure out if we're going to spend this money well, we need to know where people aren't being served. And the FCC, one of our sister agencies, is in the process of building a map of America. We've had old maps, they've been terrible about where people are unserved. The new maps are going to be much better, but we've got to make sure they're good. And one of the most important things that folks can do, and one of the messages we're sending to folks, is to be following that mapping process. The first draft of the maps is coming out this fall, and there's a challenge process, so states and communities can say, just like those folks in East Cleveland, they can say, you know, oh, you say it's served, but it's not. And that's going to be really important to raise up.
Right, and the Joint Center has actually, you know, they've led the advocacy and sort of pointing out that old FCC data and some of those maps that are being used, I know that was a big part of the report and the engagement that's been happening. And when we talk about engagement, how is NTIA engaging civil rights organizations? I know that there are many organizations, again, that will remain nameless, that sort of dominate the discussion when it comes to tech, law, and policy, and including broadband infrastructure. So, I mean, this is obviously a high-level event, and we need more events like this. And so how is NTIA trying to facilitate better engagement with organizations like the Joint Center or the National Urban League, the NAACP?
Well, first of all, I'll say it's really essential, because we need to be hearing from a broad set of voices. And I'll tell you, you know, we love our industry partners, but they are they're very effective at reaching out and speaking to us. We need to be hearing from the breadth of voices, a broad variety of voices. And I will say we've really appreciated this is a place where the Joint Center's advocacy and leadership has been incredibly important. But we need more of that. And there are other great organizations out there. You mentioned the National Urban League, NAACP, Leadership Conference. People have been great about engaging. We're trying to do a bunch of different things, really intentionally engaging with organizations, bringing folks in to talk with us and our teams about the need. Part of it is also technical assistance. So again, you can find this on our website. We're trying to get the word out in lots of ways, but there's lots of information about how do these programs work, what the details are like, how do you reach our experts to engage.
Okay.
So, and the last thing I'll just say real quick is we got a huge capacity problem here in this space. We are going to spend billions of dollars on deployment, billions of dollars on digital equity. In the next couple of years, we're going to spend more on digital equity programs than we've spent in the last 25 years. In the total history of this country, we're going to spend more in the next year or two than we've ever spent. Who's going to get that money? What are they going to do with it? We actually need more people in this space, more organizations like the Joint Center, the other national groups you mentioned. We need more people here who want to work on broadband. This is, like I say, our once-in-a-generation moment. We need help and a kind of surge in capacity to do this work out in the field.
And that's a great segue, because one of the other things that the Joint Center has led the conversation on is lack of diversity on Capitol Hill. Yeah. And a lot of that also applies to the executive branch. What are your thoughts on career paths for folks who want to enter this space?
I'd say we're hiring, and a lot of other places are hiring. I think there's a couple of different dimensions to this. One is, there's a piece of it that's the policy space, right? Like, I will just tell you, for the next 5 or 10 years, there is a massive growth opportunity in this. We can't, I was talking about hiring those federal program officers out in each state. It's incredibly hard to find them. And when we do, we worry we're stealing somebody great from a state government office or from a local community office. So we need more people in the field. I will say the other big piece of this is the broader workforce opportunity. And that's a little different than the question you asked. I mean, there is a real career path here in Washington. We desperately need more policy people who can do this work. But there's also a big opportunity out in the world. This is a jobs program, right? Like, at its heart. It's a connection program, but it's also a workforce opportunity. We want to make sure that these networks, we're spending billions of dollars to build these networks. That's going to mean a lot of jobs. And we want to make sure that it's the communities that are being served that are helping build these networks, not just importing folks who are going to build them and then leave. We want this to be part of the community effort and have a diverse workforce that is building these networks. So there's a lot of opportunity here to build up our policy workforce and also the jobs, thousands of jobs that are going to be out there in America.
So, and then in terms of Washington, what's sort of the process for someone who wants to embark on this? It has to be more than USA jobs, right?
Right.
There's some other conversations going on.
Well,
so how can folks who want to sort of work in this space, what is that trajectory for folks? And does NTI, do you and in your relationships engage, do you facilitate sort of lateral opportunities for folks who...
Totally, and I will say we've got a couple people, Sarah Morris from my office, Mark Colon, who heads our Office of Public Engagement, are in the back, and Brandon Bradford is standing back there. I just would point out those folks because, you know, if any of you are interested, if you know people who are interested, our door is open. We are trying to bring more people into this space, and we need help. And we also are very focused on where the need is out there, right? So we hear from other, you know, one of the things we're hearing from groups, some of the big nonprofit groups and others is we need help. And the states are building out their offices themselves. You know, every state's got to have has now a broadband office to receive this money. So think of us as a, you know, job placement organization if you know people who are interested in this. And we just also need to just bring more people into the field. You know, I think there's such an opportunity. Like I say, next 5 or 10 years, this is going to be our moment. We're building this, so we need to get more people who can help us think through and help the field think through how to build out these programs.
And obviously, there are a lot of stakeholders. What are some things that companies can do to help facilitate some of what we've discussed here?
A big piece of it is making sure that you know, folks are engaged in this, like the state process, the mapping process, and the ultimately build out, right? So the business end of this will be that there'll be grants that get made, right? Money will go to states. States will make grants to providers. Some of them will be the names that we all know and love and have heard, big companies that are running big networks. We're hoping there'll be a diversity of players here, small companies, new startups. There's investment money coming in, and so we want to see there's a role for all those companies to be engaged in helping build these networks. We need that, and then also in helping making sure these plans make sense. So making sure that the states are building out their plans and ultimately spending their money in the right kind of ways. So we want to hear so folks who are interested, you know, we want to hear from folks, engage in our webinars, our technical assistance programs, but really also be in touch with the states. That's where a lot of this is happening, and on the Hill.
So we do have some time for Q&A. We have about 5 minutes for Q&A. Are there questions from the audience? There has to be one. There we go.
Good.
Yes.
He'll call on people, I know. Yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Aaron Brown. I'm a third-year psychology pre-law major, leadership studies minor from Dallas, Texas. And my question for you, Mr. Davidson, is basically how would broadband affect like low-income communities that don't have access to Wi-Fi using technologies? Do you want me to reset it? Could you hear me? I'm sorry.
I could hear you fine. It's probably for posterity.
Okay,
just
so
give us a
just
short version.
restating.
Yeah, it's a good question.
My question is, how will broadband affect low-income communities that already don't have access to Wi-Fi using technology?
Right. It's a great question, and I think this is the heart of it, which is we know that the lack of access is really hurting people already. And I was saying it starts with, like, just think about what the pandemic has shown us, right? How do you get, you know, people need broadband, they need high-speed internet to be able to get online, to go to class, to do their jobs, to figure out how to get their healthcare appointments made. The world has changed a lot in a very short period, and we see it. And so communities that do not have this access are being left behind. Families that don't have this access are being left behind. And I'd say, again, we know it's about more than just access. It's about having all the tools you need to be able to succeed. So, you know, a connection, fast connection doesn't help you if you can't afford it. An affordable connection doesn't help you if you don't have the device or the skills, you don't know what to do when you get online. We've got to solve all that problem. That's what these grant programs are about. It's a great question.
Hello. Hello, my name is Evan Malbrough. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. My question is, earlier in the talk, you talked about how this building of infrastructure will create jobs. What programs or resources will be put in place to help train Black applicants and Black workers, especially young ones, so that they'll be able to not only receive these jobs, but also thrive in them?
It is a great question. We've been thinking a lot about that because if this is a jobs program, but if we don't have a diverse workforce, we will not have succeeded. So one of the most important things we're doing is thinking about working with the states and lots of nonprofits about how we can do the skill building. One of the important things I mentioned was we have a program called Connecting Minority Communities, $268 million from Congress, specifically designed to go to HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions. We've just, actually last week, did $10 million worth of grants that we got out. We've gotten $20 million out so far. But the key thing about this is that part of what those grants are go to is not just connecting those institutions, but their work to help build the workforce and to do skill building. So we're trying to do a lot of grant making to get skill building work out there, and there are a lot of groups out there that, and I would just say for those of you in some of those nonprofit groups, this is a huge opportunity area. The good news is we have a little bit of time. Like it's gonna take years to do all this. It's gonna be a few years, probably a year or two till the states really start spending their money. This is the moment to be telling people, hey, there's an opportunity out here, there are gonna be a lot of jobs. This is the moment to learn how to, help lay fiber optic cable or run these networks. And again, we want communities to be part of building networks that are going to serve them.
I really am scared to introduce myself, but I'm Kayla. I'm also from Georgia. Give a little backstory. My grandma lives on a dirt road in Georgia called Dixie, Georgia. So she lives in the deep part of the South. And the question is, in living in an area such as that, how do you plan on working with states and governors who are resistant to helping these communities?
Yeah. I think that is one of the most important questions we should be talking about here, and because we see it already, and we've just started, and you can see it in other areas of infrastructure, right? And so we want to make sure that when we're doing internet, we don't fall into the problems we've had in other areas. And I would just say, we're going to need your help. It's going to all hands on deck. We have put these requirements in for states that we've said, you have to show us, right? You have to show us that you've consulted local communities. You have to show us a plan that takes into account that broad set of needs that's going to connect everybody. That's our metric. You have to show us a plan that's going to connect everybody in your state. But we need help ground truthing that. Those plans are going to come in next year. People are going to say, give us this money, hundreds of millions of dollars. Give us that money, and we need help understanding, did they do it really what they said they were doing? Are they really going to connect everybody? And that's where folks, you all can help us, understanding where the needs are, looking at these plans, thinking about whether that meets the needs. And I will also say, and also speaking to the communities. Last thing I'll say is on this topic is we know, we've been out there. I was down in North Carolina talking to a group of folks about some of the grant programs that are out there to make, there's a program called ACP, the federal FCC runs this program, $30 a month, terrific program, $30 a month to help pay for internet access. Millions of people are eligible for it. A lot of people haven't subscribed to it yet. Why not? Well, people said to us, people don't trust the federal government when it comes along and says, oh, you should sign up for this, or you should be watching that, or you should be engaging in this program. We need voices that people trust, right? And we know that is not necessarily always going to be us. It's going to be the local communities. It's going to be church groups. It's going to be nonprofits like the Joint Center. It's going to be local community organizations, libraries and schools. That's how we're going to reach people with these things. So our message in some ways, and one of the reasons I feel so important, so thankful to be here, is because we need all those voices, the voices that people out there trust, who can help them engage in this sign up for the programs, get the money that they ought to have, and help us kick the tires on these programs. In the end, it's an all hands on deck moment. This is our shot. We need your help, and it's going to be important that we all do it together.
Absolutely, and we're out of time, but I invite everyone to, if they want to dive deeper, to check out the Joint Center's report from last year at jointcenter.org. Lots of other great information on there and excellent high-level research. So I invite you to check that out again, jointcenter.org. Alan Davidson, who is the head of NTIA at the Department of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining me, sir.
Thank you. This is a big moment. We need your help.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.